Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through some Week 17 waiver wire pickups.
Hike!
Joe, we finally met the day, or the week, I should say, where these championship matchups are going to be taking place unless you do Week 18, which I would think most don't. So this is the big enchilada. We're going to be talking about 5 players that could help you put you over the top. Let's talk about the one I'm most interested in, and we're going to get chiggy with it with Chig Okonkwo, tight end of the Tennessee Titans. Joe, we had talked about earlier when Mason Rudolph was the quarterback back in, a few games ago. It was like, hey, this might be something to behold. Not so fast. Will Levis comes back in, kind of diminishes his role, isn't relevant anymore. Well, these past 2 weeks have been very interesting. And against the Indianapolis Colts this past week, 11 targets, 9 catches for 81 yards, only rostered in 8% leagues. And now he's going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What say you, Joe, on Chig Okonkwo?
Yeah, I think with Mason Rudolph here at quarterback, as long as they stick with it, which I think they will. I mean, there's something to be had for 21 targets over the past 2 games here, and then 9 for 81 against the Indianapolis Colts, and he's got a nice matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars this upcoming week. And, you saw what Brock Bowers was able to do with Aiden O'Connell. He had a nice day. And I think Chig Okonkwo, there's a chance where if you need a tight end, you could possibly stream him this week against the Jaguars.
I think so, too. I think I would, who knows how much FAAB you have left. The tight end landscape has been up and down like a yo-yo this year. I think he's a guy that I think he's worth starting. I think you would, say, I don't know, 0 to 5% if you got, that amount of FAAB left. I think it might be worth to get this guy, and maybe you do consider starting him. Like you said, that Jacksonville matchup is really, really good. It's awfully tempting.
Yeah, so 26th against tight end, Jacksonville Jaguars are, and ironically enough, the Colts are the worst, and he had the big game. But like I said, I think the 0 to 5 is good. I agree with you there, and I think you could do a lot worse possibly at tight end this upcoming week.
I mean, would you play him instead of like Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Sam Laporta, some kind of bigger name guys?
I don't know if I would do that, but yeah, those guys are tough. But I mean, I probably would over a Jake Ferguson type, or maybe even a guy like Dalton Schultz if you've been playing him. I think
basically you're saying don't get
guys.
You're saying don't get cute with it, but if you don't have like a stud tight end, right? If those even exist, right? You would not bench them for Chig.
Yeah, I think a guy like Mark Andrews, he could be interesting because if you need a ceiling play, I think Chig Okonkwo's got a higher ceiling. But Mark Andrews, he's just been the last few weeks, he's been guaranteed to get a touchdown, so he's got that safe floor for you. But I'm thinking if you do need like a bigger ceiling play at the tight end position, maybe Mark Andrews is a guy that I would be willing to start Chig over for that reason.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. Next player we're going to be talking about here is quarterback Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers. Since his benching, Joe, Bryce Young has definitely turned the page, and he's had a really impressive game this past week against the Arizona Cardinals. Was 17 for 26, 158 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 5 carries for 68 yards and a rushing touchdown. And the Panthers ended up beating the Cardinals in overtime. From a fantasy perspective, it certainly was his best game of his career. He's now going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who the Buccaneers have been an absolute sieve. So it's a great opportunity for him, although I think Leggett missed the game. Who's going to be healthy, for that Panthers offense is something to consider. But would you consider streaming Bryce Young in your championship game?
I'd be willing to. I mean, heck, I might be heading to the championship had I had made the move in one of the leagues. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is really the reason why. I mean, they're 31st against the quarterback position. Cooper Rush had a good game on Sunday Night Football against them, tonight. And Bryce Young's been looking better. And even without Xavier Legette, like they got Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker's been there. David Moore, the veteran guy who's just been kind of all over the place, they got him involved as well. So I think even, whether they have Legette or not, I think Bryce Young is a possible streamer this week in your championship weekend. Heck, man, it's crazy that we're even talking about that.
I know. I would never thought I've heard you say that ever, especially due to your hate for Bryce Young. But I only rostered in 14% of leagues, so he more than likely will be out there for you. So definitely worth a consideration to add him. As to whether you start him, and if you got, you're not benching your Allens, your Lamars, your Burrows, right? Those are your guys that have brought you out this far. They just have too high of a ceiling. But if you have some of those middling quarterbacks based on those matchups, it could be helpful to have Bryce Young on your roster.
Yeah, it's hard to get a better matchup, and I think you could probably still get him for that 0 to 5% range, just because most people aren't necessarily streaming quarterbacks at this point. And there really hasn't been a big injury, unless something to monitor is Jalen Hurts. Maybe you're a Jalen Hurts owner. He's got a concussion, going to be in concussion protocol. Sometimes guys miss the next week. If that's the case, if you're a Jalen Hurts owner, Bryce Young would be the top guy to go ahead and get in for the fill-in.
Another option that we've got here as a possibility is quarterback Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks, rostered in 51% of leagues. Threw a ton this past week. Didn't know, what his status would be for the game, with him, leaving the game against the Packers due to injury. But he was cleared to play, and he played the whole time. 31 for 43, 314 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have 2 picks on the day. But he's got a lot of weapons there in Seattle. He's going up at Chicago. Chicago was more of a, stud defense, I'd say. But then recently, that's all kind of evaporated. That team is just kind of in, it's over over mode, kind of mail it in. So what are your thoughts here on Geno Smith?
Yeah, for that reason, just how much the Chicago defense has really taken a dip. I mean, Jared Goff and that Lions offense was really able to do whatever they wanted. I mean, Goff is the QB2 on the week behind Jaden Daniels this week. And I think Geno Smith could stay hot from this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings that he has, and do well against Chicago as well. And, Kenneth Walker got dinged up. I don't know what his status will be for this upcoming week. And then Charbonnet running back. So with Charbonnet being the starter, maybe they continue to pass and not run it as much.
Yeah, it's just so interesting that backfield. One of them has been either injured or healthy, and it's kind of went back and forth. But another streaming option for you if you're going to consider that for your championship game. Next player we're going to be talking about here is a guy who, Joe, I feel like has been in the league for so long. Honestly, I was like, wait, when did this guy come in the league? He's been in the league for 9 years. Running back Ameer Abdullah, guy, former second-round pick of the Detroit Lions. Really, I would say has had kind of a lackluster career, but all of a sudden he seems to be showing up. He had 7 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown. Had 6 targets, 5 catches for 47 yards. Next week, he's got at New Orleans, and New Orleans has been a great matchup for running backs. Should you be streaming Ameer Abdullah?
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely could. It's crazy, man. We get to this point in the season, and some of these names that you might be throwing into your lineup on, championship week or just adding to your roster, it doesn't look pretty, and doesn't sound that great. But these guys are performing. I mean, talking about back-to-back weeks for Ameer Abdullah, for PPR leagues, anyways, with 19.6, 19.5. And you mentioned it, he's got a great matchup against the New Orleans Saints coming up, who is 29th against running backs. So that's a big part of the reason I like him. And, it's just him and Alexander Madison right now. And Abdullah's been getting, a lot of the passing work. O'Connell seems fine, just dumping it down to him. And he's also been getting some work along the goal line and getting touchdowns as well. So I mean, heck, we just mentioned Kenneth Walker. Him being injured. Maybe you throw a guy like Ameer Abdullah in your lineup.
Yeah, honestly, if you look at it, he's got like a 10-point floor. I mean, he's
Right.
getting at least 5 catches for about 50 yards. So from my standpoint, it's like 10 points, I'll take it, right? And if he does anything else, that's even better. But at this time of the year, if you don't have a good running back, you need to fill in. This could be a really great option for you.
100%.
Only rostering 30% of leagues. And our last guy we're going to be talking about here, and I'm not as excited about him. I think this most recent week was kind of a flash in the pan. But that's going to be running back Gus Edwards. I went against your Denver Broncos, Joe. Had 14 carries, 68 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His best game of the year, really not even close. He's going up at New England next week, which, James Cook did run all over him this past week, but they are a different style of running backs. And J.K. Dobbins won't be there, so Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal will share here. Rostered in 53% of leagues. What are your thoughts here, Joe, on Gus Edwards?
Yeah, I know he's coming off his best performance of the year, and he had the 2 touchdowns. And I just think there's a chance that Gus Bus keeps things rolling. And you mentioned he's facing the New England Patriots, who's one of the better matchups to face from the running back position. They are ranked number 28th against running backs. So, like I said, I think Gus Bus is an interesting option. I know you're not that excited about him, and honestly, I wasn't necessarily either. But he looked decent against the Broncos, and I'm not really concerned about Kamani Vidal either. He only had 5 touches or 5 carries in the game against the Broncos too, so it's not really like they're splitting. And as long as it's Chargers are able to have that positive game script, I think it's an opportunity for Gus Bus to continue to get the double-digit carries.
Well, if it's anything like our previous week, I was not a big fan of Jerome Ford. You were, and had they listened to you, they would be sitting pretty. So maybe that's a sign of things to come for Gus Edwards.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like, some guys might not look that great all year, but then you go get into these situations. And I mean, a lot of it for Jerome Ford, man, happened honestly in the first play of the game. He had a 67-yard carry the first play of the game. And then for whatever reason, Cleveland didn't continue it for Jerome Ford until later in the game. It made no sense. But hopefully Gus Edwards can build off of that positive game that he had against the Broncos and being able to run right through the Patriots.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about some players here that we think you should go pick up for championship week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.